people are starting to notice lately. More and more, folks are asking why the world feels tense right now, why power structures feel brittle, and why truth feels dangerous again. Oddly enough, those same patterns show up at the beginning of Matthew's gospel. Matthew opens his gospel with dreams that issue commands, a star that behaves like it knows where it's going, and a political leader who reacts like he's just been tipped off about an incoming threat. That's intelligence activity. If Matthew were written today, this wouldn't be filed under religion, it'd be filed under national security. Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds. I'm Bennett Tanton, and tonight we're stepping straight into a story you think you know, but probably haven't looked at closely in a long time. Because this episode isn't about a soft-focused nativity scene on a Christmas card version of these events. This is about the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew, and why Matthew frames it less like a feel-good origin story and more like the opening moments of a spiritual conflict. Before we go any further, quick house rules for keeping the show alive. If you like what you hear, hit like, share the episode, and leave a review. That's not algorithmic magic. That's how this podcast grows. It helps this conversation reach people who are already asking questions but don't quite have the language for them yet. Okay? Now, here's the thing people are starting to notice lately. More and more, folks are asking why the world feels tense right now, why power structures feel brittle, and why truth feels dangerous again. And oddly enough, those same patterns show up at the beginning of Matthew's gospel. This episode is part of a reoccurring segment, Sunday's Spiritual Sit Rep. We're already all the way through the Old Testament at this point. But this is where we zoom out and assess the terrain and ask a simple question. What's really going on beneath the surface in this book or this scripture? And Matthew opens his gospel with dreams that issue commands, a star that behaves like it knows where it's going, and a political leader who reacts like he's just been tipped off about an incoming threat. And that's not symbolism, that's intelligence activity. If Matthew were written today, this wouldn't be filed under religion, it'd be filed under national security. And lately, people are rereading scripture with fresh eyes, especially passages that deal with angels, signs, and authority. And when you slow Matthew down, you realize he's telling us something uncomfortable. Heaven doesn't always announce itself publicly. Sometimes it moves quietly and strategically. And when it does, power notices immediately. This week, as conversations about spiritual warfare, government overreach, and unseen influence keep popping up everywhere, Matthew suddenly feels very current and not ancient, not distant, and uncomfortably relevant. The first reaction to Jesus entering the world wasn't worship, frankly, it was fear. And tonight we're going to look at how the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew sets the tone for everything that follows. Why dreams become a battleground, and why the sky itself starts signaling, and why a king responds with violence instead of curiosity. And one more thing. If you've got a friend who says, I'm spiritual, but I just don't trust institutions. Send them this episode. Seriously, this one is for them. Also, if you're a researcher, theologian, historian, or creator working in this space, and you're digging into the strange, the biblical, and what we'll call the overlooked, I am always open to connecting. Quiet conversations lead to better questions. All right, take a breath, lock in. Let's start with the most overlooked detail of all. Section 1, dreams as a battle space in the supernatural birth of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. All right, let's slow this down and sit with something most people rush past. Matthew doesn't open the story with a miracle in the sky or a public declaration. He opens it in a dream, and not a symbolic, abstract, what does this mean dream, a direct, authoritative intrusion. And that matters. In the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew, the first line of contact between heaven and humanity isn't a crowd or a sermon. It's Joseph's mind while he's asleep. That should immediately tell us something about how this conflict operates. Joseph is exhausted. He's confused, probably replaying worst case scenarios in his head. His life is about to fall apart socially, legally, and economically. And that's when the angel shows up, not to confront him, to command him. God doesn't wait until Joseph has peace. He speaks while Joseph is stressed, vulnerable, and he's unsure. And the angel doesn't ask Joseph how he feels. He tells him what's happening and what to do next. Take Mary as your wife. Don't be afraid. Name the child Jesus. This isn't therapy. It's intelligence. And Joseph doesn't argue. That pattern repeats itself throughout Matthew chapter 2. Another dream, another warning, another relocation. Move now. Don't go there. Go somewhere else. Stay until you're told otherwise. This isn't random divine reassurance. This is tactical guidance. So here's the uncomfortable part again. Scripture treats dreams as a legitimate channel of communication, but modern culture treats them like mental junk mail. Sometimes something to just swipe away in the morning. But Matthew doesn't. In the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew, dreams are not symbolic fluff. They are decision points that change history. Without those dreams, Jesus doesn't survive childhood. Without Joseph's obedience, the story ends before it even starts. If Joseph ignores one damn dream, there is no gospel. Now zoom out. Why dreams? Because dreams bypass social pressure. They bypass public resistance. No crowds to convince, no institutions to negotiate with, just one man, one message, and a choice. Dreams are private, and private spaces are harder to police. That's why this matters right now. Lately, people are talking more openly about dreams, intuition, inner warnings, and gut checks. Not in a new age way, in a why do I feel like something's off way. Matthew tells us that instinct didn't come out of nowhere. Dreams have always been a battle space. If heaven uses dreams to warn, then dreams are never neutral territory. Matthew doesn't need to explain spiritual warfare. He just shows it. Heaven communicates quietly. Danger approaches loudly. And the people who survive are the ones willing to act without applause. Joseph just never preaches, never fights. He never performs a miracle. He listens and he moves. That's the kind of obedience that doesn't trend online, but it changes timelines. And that brings us to the next signal in this story, because dreams weren't the only channel heaven used. The sky itself started behaving strangely. Hey, everybody, just wanted to talk about, I've published a book, and the title is The War You Didn't Know You Were In, Understanding and Winning the Spiritual Battle. Most people do not realize that they're in a spiritual war. They just feel tired, heavy, stuck in patterns they can't explain, like something keeps pushing back every time they try to grow, heal, or move closer to God. We get told it is just stress or trauma or even bad habits, all these things. But Scripture tells a deeper story. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. And that's from Ephesians 6:12. That's why I wrote this book. Not to scare anyone, not to by any means go chase demons, but to explain in simple, grounded language how spiritual warfare actually works, how lies become strongholds, and how truth becomes actual freedom. And if you have ever felt like something invisible was holding you back, this book was written for you. I'll put the links in the show notes. No hype, just a resource. Thanks for listening. Section 2, the star that didn't act like a star. Now, let's lift our eyes from the dream world and look up. Because in the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew, the next signal doesn't come from inside the mind. It comes from the sky. And whatever this star was, Matthew is very intentional about how he describes it. This thing does not behave like a normal astronomical object. Stars don't guide people to specific locations. They don't disappear and reappear on command. And they sure don't go before travelers and then stop over a precise destination, right? But Matthew says this one did that exactly. And that's not poetry, that's behavior. And Matthew doesn't tell us what the star was. He tells us what it did. And what it did was guide intentionally and selectively. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for modern readers. The people who notice this signal aren't priests and they aren't temple scholars. They aren't even religious insiders. They're magi from the East, straight up outsiders, observers of the heavens, men trained to watch patterns, movements, and anomalies. They see something change in the sky and think, this matters. Meanwhile, the religious elite in Jerusalem have the scriptures, all the prophecies, the infrastructure, and the authority, and they miss all of this completely. Let that sink in. In the supernatural birth of Jesus, revelation doesn't come through proximity to power or tradition. It comes through attentiveness, through people who are watching and asking and willing to move when something doesn't fit the normal pattern. And notice how fragile the system is once the signal is detected. The Magi don't intend to cause chaos. They're just asking questions. Where is the one born king of the Jews? That's it. One sentence, one inquiry. and the entire political and religious system starts to shake. It wasn't a rebellion that rattled Jerusalem. It was a damn question. Herod doesn't see the star. He hears about it secondhand, and yet his reaction, it's immediate. Fear, calculation, and control. He summons religious experts not to debate theology, but to pinpoint a location. And that's critical. Herod treats the star like intelligence, not myth. And here's the detail that really seals it. After the Magi leave Herod, the star appears again. It resumes guidance. It leads them safely to the child. Then once the mission is complete, it's gone. That timing matters. Whatever the star was, it didn't work for Herod. It only worked for those meant to follow it. And Matthew is showing us a pattern. Heaven communicates, but not indiscriminately. Signals are visible, but they're not universally interpreted. Guidance is available, but not to those seeking control. And this matters right now as well, because lately people are talking about signs again. We got patterns and shifts and cultural tremors, not in a sensational way, but in a something feels off way. We keep saying this. Matthew tells us that feeling isn't new. What's new is whether we're paying attention or waiting for permission. And the star didn't convince anyone. It revealed. And revelation always forces a choice, which brings us to the final and darkest reaction in this entire story. Because when dreams warn and stars guide, power just doesn't adapt. Power panics. Section 3. When Herod reacted like he knew the stakes. This is where the story turns dark. And it turns dark fast. Because in the supernatural, the most revealing response doesn't come from angels, dreamers, or stargazers. It comes from power, and power panics. We see it all the time. Herod's reaction is often written off as cartoon villain behavior. The evil king, bad guy, move on. But Matthew doesn't present him as foolish or confused. He presents him as threatened, deeply intelligently, and immediately. Threatened. Matthew says Herod was troubled. Man, what am I itching for? Troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. That line should stop you cold. This wasn't private paranoia. This was a system-wide disturbance. Something had entered the environment that everyone at the top felt. Matthew 2:3. When truth enters the room, power doesn't ask questions. It runs threat analysis. And Herod doesn't dismiss the Magi. He doesn't mock them. He doesn't say that's superstition. Instead, he calls in religious experts and asks a very specific question. Not if the Messiah is coming, but where. That detail matters. And Herod believes the prophecy enough to ask for coordinates. That means in the supernatural birth of Jesus, the political ruler accepts the spiritual premise faster than the people who claim spiritual authority. Let that sink in. Herod understands something instinctively. This child represents a different source of authority, one that doesn't come from Rome, one that doesn't require permission, one that can't It can't be negotiated with. And once Herod identifies the threat, he goes straight to elimination. Violence is what happens when control realizes it can't negotiate with truth. Oh man, do we see that now? The massacre of the innocents isn't random cruelty. It's a scorched earth policy. Kill every possible variable. Flood the system with chaos so nothing new can take root. Wow. Does that sound familiar, everyone? This is what power does when it feels its expiration date approaching. Here's the chilling part. Herod never meets Jesus. He never hears him teach, never sees a miracle, yet he's willing to commit mass murder to stop him. Isn't that wild? Fear doesn't require proximity. It requires perception. In the supernatural birth of Jesus, the clearest negotiation, the clearest recognition of Jesus' threat doesn't come from worship. It comes from resistance. Sometimes the strongest evidence of truth is who tries to silence it. And notice the pattern again. Just like before, heaven intervenes real quietly. Another dream, another rewrote. Joseph is warned not to return. The Magi are warned not to report back. Heaven doesn't confront Herod directly. It simply moves people out of his reach. Power swings, heaven sidesteps, and this matters right now because lately people are noticing how quickly systems respond when narratives slip, how aggressively authority clamps down when legitimacy feels threatened. Matthew shows us that this reaction isn't modern, it's ancient. I mean, it goes all the way back. And when a kingdom based on force senses a kingdom based on truth arriving, it doesn't debate, it just freaking lashes out. And Matthew opens his gospel by saying, this is how it started. Not with applause, with fear. Not with unity, with straight up division. And not with peace on earth, with a ruler terrified of losing control. Which leaves us with a question that hits, again, uncomfortably close to home. If this is how the world responds when Jesus entered quietly, what happens when truth shows up again? All right, that's the terrain. The supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew, it still matters right now. So let's land this Sunday spiritual set rep. When you strip away the Christmas haze and actually sit with the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew, what you're left with isn't a gentle beginning. It's a warning shot. Dreams become a command channel. The sky behaves like it's carrying instructions, and outsiders recognize the signals. Insiders just miss it, totally miss it, whiffs right over them. And power responds the only way power knows how, when it feels exposed. And that's with fear, with force, and with violence. Matthew doesn't open his gospel with theology. He opens it with a threat assessment. The first people to recognize Jesus weren't religious leaders. They were observers and enemies, frankly. That should matter to us right now, because lately people are starting to notice something again. Something just feels off. Conversations about authority, and truth and surveillance in control. They're not fringe anymore. They're happening right now, this week. They're happening in group chats, on podcasts and interviews. They're happening quietly beneath the surface. Not so much on the mainstream media, right? No, they're happening quietly. Matthew shows us that when something real enters the world, the first reaction isn't celebration. It's usually resistance. And here's the uncomfortable mirror again. Herod didn't need to understand Jesus to fear him. He just needed to sense that his authority had limits. Power doesn't panic over myths. It panics over replacements. And Matthew shows us a world where heaven moves quietly and systems react loudly, where obedience looks boring but saves lives, where discernment matters more than proximity to institutions, and where truth doesn't ask permission to exist. That is why the supernatural birth of Jesus in Matthew isn't just ancient history. It's a pattern, one we're watching replay in different forms right now. Before you go, do me a favor. Like the episode and share it and leave a review. This shows, it's how this show grows, guys. And it's how these conversations keep reaching people who are already questioning the surface level explanations they've been given. And seriously, if you have a friend who says, I feel like something's happening, but I can't put my finger on it, send them this episode. If you're a researcher, writer, or creator digging into biblical high strangeness, spiritual warfare, or suppressed narratives, reach out. The best work happens off the algorithm. I'm Bennett Tanton, and this has been Broadcasting Seeds. Stay grounded, stay curious, and don't ignore the signals.
He was sleeping with the weight of the world on his chest. Questions in the dark he couldn't outrun yet. Then a voice cut through the silence like a knife through air. Said, don't be afraid, but you better beware. So take the road now, don't wait for the sun. What's coming next has already begun. Some wars aren't loud, some truths stay thin. That's how it starts when heaven breaks in. Not every warning comes with fire. Some come quiet, low and wired. If you're listening, you'll know when heaven breaks in. Kings start to shake, crowns feel heavy, lines start to break. Stars start moving, dreams turn sharp. Light finds cracks in the dark. You won't hear thunder, you won't see a sign. Just the whisper saying move or you'll die. Yeah, the world don't bend, it fights to win. Every time heaven breaks in. Men from the east chasing light in the sky, following something they can't quantify. Not priests, not kings, not the ones in control. Just eyes up high and a pull in their soul. Back in the palace, fears pacing the floor. Power hates rumors it can't ignore, so it answers truth with blood and sin. That's how it goes when heaven breaks in. You don't need proof to feel the shift. Just watch what power does when it's hit by something it can't cage or spin. When heaven breaks in, no crown regime, just a child breathing in the system, afraid because truth don't ask permission to stay. When heaven breaks in, masks fall fast, empires panic clutch the past, dreams get heavy, roads go thin, you either move or you're buried in. You won't hear thunder but you'll feel the wind pulling the veil just enough to see in. Yeah, the war begins where most won't look, every time heaven breaks in. Watch the signs, sometimes the front lines in your mind. If you're listening, you'll know when heaven breaks in.